For the first step, you are going to have to set up a configuration consisting of one or more quarter 20 rigid drops. The number of drops and orientation will be contingent upon how many fixtures you want to have secured to said structure. The particular setup will be determined by the installing contractor. Just be sure to account for the cumulative weight of all fixtures and any other things that you plan on installing onto the structure. Also, you want to be sure to allow for enough space laterally within the ceiling to avoid interference with the ceiling grid crossmembers, joists, or similar fixed structures that may cause interference with the end product installation. The rule of thumb is to allow for 4.5 inches of clearance on all sides from where your quarter 20 rod is going to be mounted to allow for proper clearance. In addition, it is strongly recommended that if possible, the setup enables you to make up-down adjustments to each of the rod drops. We'll show you why shortly. For this particular configuration, we are mounting 3 pendant fixtures in line with one another. So what we did here was suspend the length of unistrut roughly 17 inches above the ceiling. You can actually get it a bit closer to the ceiling plane if desired, but you want to allow for at least 1 foot of clearance between the ceiling plane and the rigid mounting structure for the driver assembly to be installed. Once you've got your structure laid out, you want to utilize the up-down adjustability that we mentioned earlier and adjust the end of the rod such that it is between 1/2 inch and 1 1/4 inches from the bottom of the ceiling plane. Alternatively, if up-down adjustment is not an option, you can remove and cut your threaded rod to the appropriate length. Depending upon the driver enclosure style, select the appropriate stencil included within the context of the fixture installation instructions. Cut the stencil from the respective page and secure to the desired location of the ceiling, making sure that the stencil is concentric with the quarter 20 rod that was installed in the previous step. Using a marker or pencil, trace around the perimeter of the stencil. Remove the stencil from the ceiling and cut the hole along the marked pattern. Prepare the driver enclosure for installation. Unscrew the caps of the plastic gripper and depress the top to slide down the aircraft cable. Repeat for all grippers. Move the canopy down and unscrew the 2 screws securing the driver enclosure bottom cover to the driver enclosure. Slide down the bottom cover to allow enough room to do wiring inside the driver enclosure. Install the driver enclosure onto the rod using the wing nut. Adjust until the driver enclosure is approximately 1 3/4 inches away from the bottom of the ceiling. Wire accordingly. Depending upon the fixture type being installed, there can be up to 3 functional light engines. Out of the box, all driver enclosures have each circuit independently wired and labeled. This enables the flexibility to choose between common or independent switching. Detailed wiring diagrams illustrating each potential configuration can be found at the end of each product's installation instructions. Once wiring has been completed, secure the driver enclosure bottom to the main unit using the 2 1/4-inch hex driver screws that were removed from the assembly earlier during preparation. Install the second wing nut. Tighten it such that, at rest, the bottom of the J-box is between 1 3/4 inches to 2 1/4 inches from the bottom surface of the ceiling plane. Secure the canopy enclosure in place by aligning the enclosure hole with the quarter 20 rod and pushing the enclosure up towards the ceiling such that the top surface of the flange is flush with the ceiling surface. Then secure in place using the third and final wing nut. Once the canopy enclosure is secured in place, install the canopy utilizing the patent-pending magnetic interface. In order to maintain a clean aesthetic and minimize the overall size of the fixture below the ceiling, we chose to utilize power over aircraft cable technology in this design as an alternative to a typical feed cord assembly. We actually leveraged 2 different styles, a single conductor version, which we use on all of our ring fixture variations, and a 2 conductor version, which is used on all fixture types that include the cylinder. It is important to note that while the cables are not insulated, each of the circuits that are created using them are all low voltage, and therefore there are no safety concerns with regard to the potential of electrocution if they are touched, for whatever reason, when the circuit is live. There are, however, precautionary measures that we needed to take into consideration when designing the product to ensure that the cables do not come into contact with mating metallic components, which could cause a short in the circuit, resulting in the luminaire not functioning as desired. To account for this, each mating component that the cables pass through is equipped with nylon bushings, which act as barriers and isolate the circuit to prevent shorting. With the canopy now installed, we're going to show you how to install the indirect-direct cylinder ring combination, starting with the cylinder. To begin, determine the desired mounting height of your fixture. Based upon that mounting height, establish what the corresponding distance is from the bottom surface of the canopy to the top of the cylinder through utilizing the indirect light engine assembly. To do so, loosen the nylon lock nuts on the top side of each of the grippers pre-attached to the braided aircraft cable. Depress the top portion of the gripper to move it up and down along the aircraft cable. Adjust the grippers to move the indirect light engine into place. Move the grippers to the underside of the light engine to act as a temporary platform for the light engine to sit upon. Apply a little bit of pressure to the top side of the light engine and level the unit. Check the measurement from the ceiling to the top of the light engine to confirm that it's in line with the target established distance to achieve your desired mounting height. If the distance checks out and the unit is level, leaving the indirect light engine in place, measure 2 inches from the bottom surface of the indirect light engine and mark each of the aircraft cables at said distance using a permanent marker. Now, using Felco-type cable cutters, cut each of the cables at the marked location. Do your best to ensure a clean cut, as it will help facilitate the installation of the aircraft cable into the mating grippers in the preceding steps. With each of the 3 cables cut, on the grippers below the indirect light engine, loosen each of the 3 lock nuts and temporarily move the light engine out of the way so that you can complete the next couple of steps. Now you want to measure 1 inch from the bottom of each of the cut cables and mark with a permanent marker. Using 16-gauge wire strippers, clamp down at the marked location and strip the outer sheathing and nylon insulation from each of the aircraft cables. It's a little easier to achieve a cleaner cut by rotating the wire strippers 360 degrees a couple of times prior to removing the sheathing. As mentioned earlier, each cylinder suspension cable is comprised of 2 conductive elements which are isolated with a nylon barrier throughout the length. So what you want to be mindful of when making these cuts is ensuring that the conductors do not come in contact with one another. Again, this is not a safety concern as it is low voltage. However, if the 2 conductors come into contact with one another, it will prevent the luminaire from functioning properly. Taking this into consideration, once the sheathing has been removed, trim any excess outer sheathing strands that may have been created during the stripping process. In addition, you can twist the stripped cut of the sheathing and pull it back in order to clean it up further and reduce the potential of any contact between the 2 conductors further on during installation. Now it's time to install the cylinder. Start by aligning the circuits with one another by matching up the respective labeled markings on each of the drops: AA, BB, CC. Loosen the knurled nut on the inner cylinder grippers. Plug the designated cable into each of the respective grippers. Make sure each is properly seated. You will hear an audible click, which will confirm that the gripper has properly secured to the cable. Check that the top of the fixture is level and tighten down the knurled nuts once level to secure the fixture in place. Now you can bring the indirect light engine back down. Make each of the respective wire connections using a small wire nut or quick connector. Adjust the grippers into their respective pockets, making sure that no portion of any gripper is sitting above the top inner surface of the heatsink. Tuck all wire connections into each of their respective pockets. Align the indirect light engine, and secure in place using a single 1/4-inch hex drive screw. As shown, the top surface of the indirect light engine should be flush with the top surface of the cylinder sidewall. This completes the installation of the cylinder. Ring cable drops on the cylinder are pre-cut at the factory to the appropriate desired lengths. Therefore, it's advised that these cables remain as is and do not get modified any further in the field. To install the ring, loosen each of the 3 grippers located on the top surface of the ring. Align each labeled gripper location with its corresponding labeled cable, and plug the cables into each of their respective grippers. Once engaged, push each cable down until it stops. Again, make sure that each gripper emits at least 1 audible click to identify that the cable and gripper are properly engaged with one another. Now is a good time to do one final check to ensure that the ring is level. Provided the leveling process was done properly with the cylinder, you should for the most part be in good shape at this point. If it appears off a bit, you are able to make some slight adjustments in each of the cable gripper locations for some last-minute refinement. Secure each of the knurled nuts, remove the polarity labels, and that concludes the installation of the ring. The ring-only fixture type is comprised of 2 primary below-ceiling components. the ring collar, which enables a consistent cable transition between fixtures at varying sizes and mounting heights, and the ring luminaire itself. So before you get going on the primary installation, to facilitate the process, it's recommended that you prepare the plastic ring collar by setting each of the screws. A few turns should suffice, enough to prevent them from becoming dislodged during the latter part of the installation. Start by installing the plastic collar with the screws from the previous step. To do so, insert each of the 3 cable drops through their respective holes, being mindful of proper orientation. Each cable should be vertical and in line with the respective hole origin in the canopy. Referencing the noted specifications in the installation instructions, determine the respective mounting height of the ring collar, then level and secure the set screws in place. Once the plastic collar is at the desired height, level, and secured, install the finished cast collar in a similar fashion to what was done on the plastic collar, align accordingly, and then secure in place using the 3 screws provided. Now, refer to the installation instructions and based upon your specific fixture ring diameter, find and make note of the specified cut cable length from the collar to the ring. Measure and mark each of the respective cable drops from the collar down to the respective distance noted. Cut the cable at each of the measured and marked locations using Felco-type cable cutters. Now it's time to install the ring. To do so, loosen each of the 3 grippers located at the top surface of the ring, align each labeled gripper location with its corresponding labeled cable, and plug the cables into each of their respective grippers. Once engaged, push each cable down until it stops. Again, make sure that each gripper emits at least one audible click to identify that the cable and gripper are properly engaged with one another. Now is a good time to do one final check to ensure that the ring is level. Provided the leveling process was done properly with the collar, you should for the most part be in good shape at this point. If it appears off a bit, you're able to make some slight adjustments in each of the cable gripper locations for some last-minute refinement. Secure each of the knurled nuts, remove the polarity labels, and that concludes the installation of the ring.